So I added a couple of links here. There's the two lecture videos that I recorded. I'm recording today as well. And then I added this link to CSS, to some notes that I'm making on CSS. The CSS is my weak area. So during the course, I'll probably spend some time researching that myself. So I started making some notes, and I'll share that with you today. You can see a little bit what I have there, just that little piece there. And then also this site, this caniuse.com, is really handy. It's, for instance, I was looking at CSS variables, or CSS, what do they call it, properties? CSS properties, I think that's what they call it. And outline properties, that's not it. CSS, maybe variables. Custom properties, that's it, custom properties. And it's fantastic. It shows you, see the different browsers, IE, Edge, Firefox, Chrome, and so on. And it gives you the usage for each of these. So for instance, Internet Explorer version 11 is the global usage, is 1.74%. So that's an estimate. So they're saying that 1.74% of all browser requests are coming from Internet Explorer 11 across the globe. And similarly, let's say take Chrome, which I'm using here. Chrome version 77, global usage is 0.05. But if you look at this version, I don't know what this must be the current, this row here must be the current version, like the most recent release version. If you look at Chrome, this is the big one here. Look at the usage, 28% globally. And I guess that's a group of versions 49 through 76, or I'm not sure what that means. Yeah, Chrome 49 to Chrome 76. And if you look at Safari, it's at 2%. Or this is Safari that was released in September of 2019. And the green means that this particular feature, CSS variables, this particular feature is supported in these browsers that are listed in green. If you go back in time, you look at Safari, versions 3.1 to 9, they don't have support for that particular feature. So when you're deciding whether to include a particular advanced feature or not in your website, you can check in this site to see how many people you're losing by adopting that. So anybody that's using Safari version 9, that if I'm using CSS variables in my website, it's going to be broken for them. So maybe that doesn't matter. So we'll go ahead and use it anyway. So this is pretty handy. This site here, can I use? So let me come back. Let's see. Let's take a look at. I'll go into the repository here. Let's take a look at. We talked about HTTP last time, so I'm just going to let's just build a web page together and talk about it step by step as we go through it. And there's two ways of doing this. One is we could build a web page and then just open it up from the file system and see how it works. Or we can open it up through through the server, like I was running Node.js, a Node.js server. And if everything is in a single page, we can just open that file up from the file system. But if we are splitting the web page into separate pieces, then then there's a security issue. The browser doesn't like to process those kind of web pages. So we need to load it through a web server running locally. Let's just see how that might work. Okay, let's open up this. I guess we'll just do index.html here. Let's go ahead and open this up. So we're going to open a file. And let's see, it's in this folder, index.html. There we go. Hi and bye. Not a problem. Now this is HTML that's missing a bunch of stuff. I'm going to fill that in a bit. So the browsers are pretty forgiving when you violate syntax rules in your HTML. So they're designed to do that. They've been doing that for a long time. There's just so many mistakes in web pages that the browsers are basically look at how they ignore those mistakes. Formally, a web page is supposed to be inside of this HTML element. That's the parent element. And everything is inside this parent. I'll just indent by 2 spaces to show that child-parent relationship. So you've got a head inside this HTML parent. You've got 2 child parents. I'm sorry, 2 child elements. A head element and a body element. So this is an empty web page. There'll be nothing in that. And the head element can have various child elements as well. The head element is a child of this HTML element. So you've got, in web pages, you've got lots of levels in this tree. So it forms a tree. But HTML is the root of the tree. Under that tree, you've got the head node and the body node. And then under the head node, you've got 0 or many child nodes, and within those child nodes, you've got subnodes and so on. But there's a node in there, or an element in the head that's called title, and I'm just going to call it testing 1, 2, 3. Now this title is not displayed in this part of the web page. It's displayed up here. So watch when now it just says index.html. If I reload this, it shows the title. So it gets the title, it looks at the title element in the head and displays that in the tab. The browsers do that. All the browsers that I've ever looked at do that. A lot of times you see something like this. You would see, the body. The body contains the elements that are going to be rendered into the window of the browser. So we have a heading element. Let's use a level 1 header, and we'll just duplicate this title here. Sometimes you see this. This would be kind of common. So now the title shows up in the tab, but it's also visible to the user in the web page. I don't know. It's just, you see that a lot, but it's not necessary. The body has some information in it, which is organized into these elements. And each element is comprised of a start tag, such as like a div, content, and then a closing tag. Has the same name as the start tag, but starts with a slash. And here a div is a generic block of text or anything. It's just a generic container. Div was something that came about historically after people were normally using this paragraph tag, so just P for paragraph. There it is. So a div didn't exist in the early days of HTML, but it was added at some point, and they wanted just a generic container of child elements. But still, you see, you can use them both. It's just that the browser has more of default styling rules. It may have different styling rules applied to paragraph text that appears in paragraphs versus text or other elements that appear within divs. But more and more you see web pages being comprised of divs because CSS, cascading style sheets, is so widely used now. And so we just pretty much want to specify all the styling of that information that's in the div using CSS. So that's just although you could just use paragraph as well, it just doesn't really matter. It's just a convention that you see people following. Maybe I should do some simple stuff here. There's another, let's see, let's do it like this. I use a div here. Here's a hello. And let's put in a link. You know, HTML is hypertext markup language. So what is hypertext? Hypertext just means links. So the way to create a link is with the A tag or the anchor tag. And you've got an anchor tag, so you've got a link here, A, and let's link to, say, the university website. So that's what it's going to look like. So that's a, you know, you've got text, and then you've got, so this link is text. You see it as a text, although you can have images could also be links. But hypertext didn't say hyper images markup language. It's this hypertext markup language. The original design of HTML was for enabling people to sort of annotate or annotate text in documents with some extra information that allowed the user agent or the browser to let the user click or activate the link and go to a separate document. So there was a way of creating a web of documents. So different, you know, each document would have references to other documents. You could quickly navigate across this web. So it was called people started calling it the World Wide Web. World Wide Web is these web pages that are all linked together using these anchor elements. It was originally it was just text. So, you know, it was Tim Berners-Lee, is the guy credited with creating the World Wide Web. And he was a physicist in Europe at CERN. And he invented this sort of technology because it facilitated research. Physics is physics research, so people could share information. And if I'm reading something, I'm reading a document about, you know, something scientific, some scientific information. I reach, say, maybe I reach a term, or someone's referring to a paper that discusses the details, and then rather than just having the name of the paper, well, we make it a hyperlink so someone could quickly click on that link and boom, you go over to that information. Maybe I'm not informed about that that area. So it was just a way to facilitate research, consumption of information. So now we're all using it. So it grew pretty quickly. It spread pretty quickly after it was created. So now this link, the thing is, the link, but I don't know what it's going to show here. And notice, let's take a look at that. I'm going to get rid of this head. Well, I'll leave it in there. Hello, CSUSB. It's not, there's no underline to it. And that's because we're not telling the browser where to go. So these tags, they start with a tag name. We'll start with an angle bracket, then they have a tag name, and then they have any number of attributes. And the anchor tag has an attribute called href, which is what's a hypertext reference, hyper reference. I'm not sure what the H is, probably hyper something. And so this would be the this is a property or an attribute, the same thing, attribute property. Those words are used interchangeably. It's got the name of the property here, href, and then the assignment operator, and then a string. So it's just a variable set to a value. And the string has got the value in it. So let's put the value in it, and it'll be, say, www.csusb.edu. There we go. That's the host name. That's a host name. Or domain name, not a host name. We'll call it a domain name. Although it gets us to a host. But it may not get us to the same host each time, because maybe the university has so much traffic going to it, it needs multiple web servers. And when traffic comes in, maybe the traffic is split up across, you know, an array of web servers. So we don't know. We may be hitting different IP addresses each time we send in a request here. You know, like Google.com. When you go there, all the traffic in the world, one computer can't handle it. So like host, when I use the word host, it means a computer. Host means computer. A computer connected to the internet. That's what host means, a host. So Google.com is a domain name. And the browser contacts this thing called a domain name system, DNS, which is a topic I'm not going to get into. But it sends out, the domain name system, it's a distributed system. So there's servers on the internet. And the browser has the IP address of various DNS servers. So when you type in, when you give the browser a domain name like this, it turns around and sends a string to a DNS server and say, give me the IP address for that DNS server. Give me the domain name, rather. Give me the IP address of that domain name. And then the DNS server returns an IP address. So the domain name servers that are returning, you know, IP addresses for Google.com, there's a way to, like, some of the traffic is given one IP address, other parts of the traffic, they can't send everything to a single IP address, so it has to be sort of spread out. So that's going on in the back. I just thought it's just a little side trip there to think about that stuff. But you know, you read about domain name systems, you think about, do experiments, you get to learn on this topic. It's important, especially if you're a sysadmin person. That's important for everybody, computer science, everybody, web programmers. So this host is, so this refers to, one or just a website. Well, we need to specify the protocol, and the protocol HTTP. And then after the, or it could be HTTPS. Actually, we saw the other day that the university does not honor requests that are unencrypted. It'll redirect us with a 302 message, an HTTP 302 message. I think it's 302. That's going to do a redirect anyway. It's going to redirect us to the secure version of that. And so that's why we got HTTP. S is for secure. I think it's for secure. Well, whatever it is. It's HTTPS, basically HTTP over top of what's called the TLS, or Transport Layer Security. It's another protocol that sits on top of TCP. Once again, we're not going to get into that. That's for another class. A class that focuses on networks or networking. And so we got the protocol, and we've looked at two protocols. That's one protocol. Here's the other protocol. So these are communication. A protocol is it's language that the browser and the server use to talk to each other. That's what the protocol means here. Or it's a mechanism by which those two hosts, well, they're both hosts, just internet-connected computers, so we call it a host. So my laptop is a host. So then you've got the domain name, and then following the domain name, you've got a slash here normally. Although you don't have to, you can leave it out. Put a slash, and then you have a resource identifier, or a resource name, index.html, right? Or maybe logo.png, right? So that specifies a resource. Well, you can think of it as, oh, that must be a file. But actually, it may not be a file. Maybe it's a computer program, and it gets a request for logo.png, and it says, it doesn't go to get a file. It just sort of generates something on the fly and sends the bytes to you. So if you see something like this, you see a resource identifier, it's not necessarily a file. It could be something that's generated on the fly, taken out of the database, or just generated based on some algorithms running when the request is being processed. So by convention, people use index.html. That's very old convention, way, way back. That's the kind of like the directory into a folder location in a hierarchy of resources. So maybe you have sports, and under sports you've got some information, or maybe you have sports and you've got golf. So you see you've got a hierarchy. So now the resources are organized into a hierarchy. And it looks like, well, that would be like your folder system, right? There must be a folder called sports, and in that folder is golf. Yeah, if you have a static web server, which that's what I demonstrated, that Express-based web server run in Node, that just serves static documents, things that come from the file system. So yeah, you could think of this as being like, oh, there's a file called index.html. It's in a folder called golf, which is in another folder called sports, which is in another folder that the web server is configured to start its search from. But it may not be that. That may just be, you could use that as a model to think about. But actually, there may be no folder called sports anywhere. It's just, it's just interpreted by a web application that's running on the server side. It's, oh, sports, okay, that means we gotta delegate this request to another web server. So you may have, the web server you're hitting may actually be a proxy for another web server, and it's just you get to the other web server through part of this resource name. So anyway, you'll figure that out as you go along, as you start working on the server side to learn about that more. But for this class, we can think of these resource hierarchies as folders. That's what you'll be dealing with in this class. Everything will be a folder and a file. And so that the top level sort of web page, the home page of the university, would naturally be called index.html. But that's the default. So if you send a request for just the root, like if you wanted the root on sports, the web server would look for something like index.html if it was a static web server like the one we're using, so on. And it would look for index.html, and if it didn't find it, maybe it would look for index.php or whatever the system administrator configured the web server to use as the default. So we could send in a request for this. If we send in a request for that, it gets rewritten by that. If you dig into the messages that get exchanged between the web server and the web browser, either the browser may add that slash, or it sends in a request for this and then it's redirected to this. But probably the browser adds the slash, well, maybe not actually. So anyway, this is the value of this attribute, this HyperText reference. And so we'll look at that, reload that. You'll see now it's underlined. That's the default. We could turn that off. It doesn't have to be underlined. But that's the default style in which the browser is presenting this hypertext linked to us. A link. This is called a link, and or an anchor tag. And a link is generated by an anchor tag. Now, if this div here there's a difference between the div element and this anchor element. The anchor element, by default, has an inline display behavior, and the div element has a block display behavior. So look at if I put the hello in a div, and I put the anchor tag in a div. So we have two divs as child elements of a parent div. And this is a little hard to read, so we just do it like this, okay? We'll just spread it out like that so we can see the structure a little easier, right? So this div contains this, and we can go even further. And you could say, well, that div has this A element to it. There we go. Now we got this hierarchy, see? And we have plain text in here. And here we have this div has plain text, right? And this div has, and this is really subtle here, it doesn't have just an anchor element. It's got plain text, then an anchor element, and then more plain text. Because you see, I have a line break here, right? And then there's a bunch of spaces here. That's text that the browser looks at. And that's considered text. I'd have to get rid of that text. If I only want the anchor element inside to function as the content of this div, I would need to do this. Okay, now I'd have to get rid of those new lines and get rid of those spaces. You know, those are called white spaces, by the way. You know, a space, you know, hitting the space bar or hitting the return key, generating a new line. Those are called new line characters, or sorry, white space characters. You don't see them white space, you should say invisible space characters. They're not, you see the behavior has some effect on what gets rendered, but you don't see them, you don't see it as like a character. So these, here we have two div elements inside of a parent div element, which is inside of a parent body element, which is inside of a parent HTML element, and that's the root element. Let's see, how does that render? Oh, look at that. It puts a new line. It separates it out to a new line there, see? That's because the div is, it has a, what's called a block behavior. And the anchor tag has an inline behavior. So the anchor tag is it acts like text. It just sits in a line, which is then, what do you call it? What's the word? Wrapping. It wraps. You know, something like that. Just silly things right there. And you see when I make the window smaller, you're going to get some wrapping. See that? Okay, so that's the behavior of an inline element. So something, anchor tags by default are inline. Now you can convert, we could force the anchor tag to act like a block element. Or we could force the div to act like an inline element. We could change that using CSS. So that behavior of inline versus block is controllable through CSS. So these are just the default styling rules. You know, that the anchor tag by default, if we're not going to specify anything otherwise, the browser is going to interpret that anchor tag as being an inline element. Display it like you would display text that wraps, expands to fills its container horizontally and then wraps around to continue that sequence of characters. It's the same with the image. Image is also inline. Let's see, we got to get an image here. Let's get an image. I think, is that an image? Let's see. That's an image right there, right? Copy the link address. So I just want to, no, it's a link address, sorry. Open image in new tab, there we go. Textbooks.jpg, there it is, that's an image. See the URL? See it's got the domain name, library.csusb.edu. Okay, that's a domain name. Slash, and now we've got the resource name. You know, it starts at the root, slash, you have highlighted the starting slash, it's the root, that's the root of this hierarchy. And then you've got something that looks like a folder called images, and in that folder you've got an image file called textbooks.jpg. So let's use this image and experiment with that. I'm going to copy that, and let's go ahead. I'm going to use wget to grab that. See, that's wget's pretty handy there. Here's the image, textbooks.jpg. Let's go ahead and put that image in there. Maybe I'll put it here. So the image tag img. Then you have to give there's an attribute src or source, and there it is. And the image doesn't have, it's a probably like a self-closing tag. There's no content to the image tag. So it's a, what do they call that? You've got tags that have, you know, the anchor tag has a start tag and an end tag, but the image tag is it's both the start tag and an end tag. So it's only a container of attributes. It's not meant to be a container of information. Actually, I don't know if the image, does the image work if you do something like this? Does that work? Let's see if that does anything. I think that's kind of broken. Let's see. Oh, there's the by. So it does have, it can contain stuff. Yeah, that's the same as just doing this. Watch, it's going to be no difference if I do this. If I close the image tag, let's see. So if some tags you can close without any content. Well, all tags you can close pretty much without content, and you do that by having this trailing slash here rather than a leading slash here. See this anchor tag, the end tag starts with a slash, but when you have a self-closing, when you have an element that has you know, a single tag, then you put the slash at the end like that. And this is the same as what we just had. You'll see, I'm going to hit refresh. There's going to be no difference. It'll just say by just like that. Watch this. See, oh, there's a little space there. Okay. A little different. Yeah, so some subtleties there. But these are, you know, this image just sits. It's part of the flow of text. You see that? Hello, CSUSB, your number. This is like the link. This link is part of the flow of the text. This image sits inside the flow of the text. It's another inline element. You can use CSS. You can use CSS to make it a block element. Let's see how to do that. I'm going to add another attribute here called style. And in that, for the value of the style attribute, I'm going to put in a CSS rule. Well, not a rule. What would you call it? Like a formatting rule. I think they use the word rule to mean something that includes a selector as well. So we don't have what's called a selector, and maybe I'll talk about that later. You just have the styling rule in here, the styling command. I was going to call this, it's going to be, there's different kinds of styling functions, and what's the word? But what we're going to do is set the display to inline. I couldn't think of the word for that. So that's the current, so this should be no change. It's already inline. But if we make it a block element, we change the display value to block. Yeah, so this is a CSS, so I guess it's a key or it's a name. And this is the value associated with that key or name. now to function as a block element. That means it doesn't sit in the flow of the text. It'll break out of the flow of the text. So let's see what it looks like. See that? Now it's a block element. So those are two important things to keep in mind. Now there's three different ways of specifying the styles, CSS styles, attaching a style to an element. And this is one way to do it. You do it with the style attribute. Another way to do it is you have what's called a style element separately, and we're going to put the rule, or that styling rule, inside there. So we're going to have that display block is going to be placed up there. So now we want that to apply to this image. We don't want it to apply to this what do you call it, the anchor element. So when we pull that CSS styling command out of the attribute, we use what's called a selector to tell the browser where that styling command should be applied. So we can do it like this. We can just use the name of the tag, and then an open brace, and then a closing brace with the styling command on the inside there. So all images should have block display. There it is. Well, we change our mind. No, all images should have an inline display. Oh, there we go. Or maybe we want not all images, we want everything to be block. And that means we want the anchor tag, just the level 1 header is already a block level element by default. The div is block level by default, but the anchor tag is inline by default. But using this wildcard here, the asterisk, functions as what's called a wildcard. It matches against all element types and says make all elements a block element. So that means this anchor here, this link should break out as if it was, a separate piece. So you'll see it'll hello, and then it'll be new line CSUSB, new line, you're number 1, new line image, new line, yes, you are number 1. There it is. See, now the link is acting as a block element. Now, there's a third way. So now we've seen two ways of specifying styling rules. There's a third way. That's to use an external style sheet. All right. So instead of specifying this, this is called, by the way, what I have shown you right here, it's called an internal style sheet. Now, an external style sheet, we need to give, is it href? I can't remember. Is it href or source? Yeah, I always have to look this up all the time. I want someone out there to tell me. It's href? Thank you. It's just one of those things. I'll never, ever remember this for some reason. Okay, so we're going to call it, we'll call it styles. By convention, the extension for an external style sheet is .css, just like the convention for HTML file is .html. The convention for JavaScript files .js, those are the extensions. All right, so that we got to create this this external style sheet now. Styles.css. And so we want to make everything a block, have block characteristics. There it is. But there's a problem here. What's wrong? Well, we'll do a little investigation here. I'm going to what do I do here? I'm going to look at the developer view. I want to see developer tools here. Look at that. Very handy. And let's go ahead and reload that and see what it says. It didn't seem to be trying to load that thing. What is going on there? That's href. Maybe it shows the information here somewhere. I don't got a lot of space here. So why is it not, is that right for the, did I get that right? Let me think here. Let's do a view source on this. Let's look at the external, oh, see, this is how you do a style sheet. You don't use the style element, external style sheet, you have to use the link element. And it's href, but it's not a style, it's a link. And look, they don't have a closing tag, and they also don't bother to put a slash there. So I think it's supposed to be a slash, maybe not. Once again, the browser doesn't enforce that kind of stuff. So this should be a link tag, not a style tag. Now, once again, I can't remember this. And this isn't even needed. So that's good enough. You could put it in there if you wanted. I like to put a space here. You don't need a space, it could be like that. And so that's one way to figure stuff out. You just look at just view source on a web page and see how things are working. All right, so I'm going to get rid of the console here. I'm going to reload this. Oh no, I better leave that open. Let me reload that thing. And everything is in line, right? This is in line. They're still not getting it. Styles. Do I need to put that? Let me go back. View source. Relation equals style sheet. I think I need that. You know, usually when I do this, I just like grab an example and then I edit it. And so I can never remember it. There we go. This is going to work now. And let's go ahead and get that. There we go. You're number one. Everything's a block level element. That's called an external style sheet. And you'll see we don't have to run through a web server. And look at this. If we put a script tag in here, And in the script tag, we can add some JavaScript. We're just going to display an alert that says hi. I load this, I'll get a pop-up box that says hi. See that? Now I could do the same thing with the script and make it external. I'll call it my hi.js script. And I think scripts have to have that form. Let's take a look at the university website. Here's a script. Script tag src equals something. And then look, it has to put the closing tag here. But that's not needed with the link element. You know, it's kind of an inconsistency. But that's how that's how things develop. You know, the web is constructed, as in most things. Well, I mean, unless you're talking about something like a bridge or an airplane or something. Well, a bridge. This technology is built incrementally, and they keep, adding things one after another. Then you get some inconsistencies in the, in the syntax, I guess you call it. All right, so here's the script, and we're going to put we're going to create a script that says hi here. So hi.js, and it's going to say alert, hi. There it is. I haven't done this in a while. I don't know what it's going to show me. So let me reload this. It still says hi. So what's the deal? I thought I had to go through a web server, but apparently it's all right. I think we're okay. At some point we have to go through web server. Apparently we don't have to with this setup here. So scripts can also be in the head section. Say bye this time. Reload. Oops, sorry, that was dumb. I gotta say bye in here. There it is. So here we have a web page here that has an HTML file, right? That's what we're looking at right here. It's in a file called, what is it? Index.html? Yeah. So we've got a file called index.html, and the browser, we tell the browser to open index.html, and the browser, goes through this sequentially. It looks at the first character, then the next one, then the next. It's parsing the data. And then when it gets to here, it says, oh, to render this web page, I need another file, or I need another resource, to be more generic about it, but we'll just call it a file. I need another file, and it's called styles.css, so I'll need to request that from the web server, or I'll need to, in this case, retrieve that from the file system. And so I think it puts it on hold for a moment, and then it perhaps, or it spawns a thread and starts to load it separately, whatever. And then it comes to the next element and it says, oh, I got another external file that I got to load. So now I got, in addition to this index.html that I retrieved from the file system, now I got 2 more objects to retrieve. And then it goes head and body, and that's got the head here. Well, yeah, I can render the head. Then it comes down here. Then it hits this image tag. It goes, oh, I got another external file to load in order to render the whole page. So this web page that we're looking at right here is 4 files. That's 4 files that the browser had to load from the file system, or in the normal case, retrieve from the web server. That's why you have that HTTP connection header, connection keep alive. That's the default, because normally when the browser retrieves the web page, it's got to get a whole bunch of other stuff. So let's not tear down the TCP connection, reopen it every time we need a piece of information. Let's just make a single TCP connection and get everything across that, and then close it. Question? Over there? Okay. 5 o'clock. What should we do next? How's this information? Yeah, back there.
Yeah. Can you link, like, say, a second web page from a different directory, and just show it, like, actually switching to it?
You mean like linking over to it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I could show that. Let's do that. Oh, and I wanted to show you something. See this link? This link goes to an external, this goes to a web server, right? It's not going to a web browser. I'm sorry, it's not going to the file system. It's linking out to outside of the file system, to some web server. And this source here, this SRC, is being loaded locally. But we didn't have to load this locally. We could load this remotely. And where's that thing? Oh, don't even see it anymore. We'll use this one then. Copy link address. Okay. There, that's that one. I'll copy that one. Copy the link address. Up. Can you believe that? Copy image address. Not link address. Copy the image address. Textbooks. There it is. You see, I can retrieve just that image. So I'm going to copy that URL right there. And so see here, textbooks.jpg, that's stored in the file system. There it is, textbooks.jpg, right? If I remove that, it's gone, right? Now when I reload this, I got to get rid of that thing. See that broken image there? That means that the browser couldn't get that image. It sees an image tag, but wasn't able to get the resource. Let me get rid of the script here. But rather than loading from the file system, we could get that image from the university web server. But to do that, we have to provide the URL. Look at this, it's unencrypted. You see that? So not the home page, the main page, the home page is encrypted, but apparently other parts to the university web presence is unencrypted. Now we retrieve this. Now we got the image. But now when the browser constructed, the web page, it had to go out to the university web server to get the image instead of pulling it from the file system. Now this link here, when we hit that link, we go, the web page is loaded locally, from the C file up there, it's the file system. We go to the link and it goes to, a secure external host. Well, what about if we want to load, something else, say x.html. Call it x. Now we want to load x.html from the file system. See that file x.html up there? Oh, file's not found. Well, because it doesn't exist. Let's go ahead and create that. I'm x. I can see that. Hit back to go back. But the question was about directories.
Yeah.
So that's what I had to build up to it. Here we go. I want to make a directory called test. And let's move x.html into test. So now we have, we've got our index.html file. And then we have a folder called test. And inside the test folder, we've got a file named x.html that says I'm x. I didn't have to reload that. Now when I click on X, the file's not there because it's in test. See? There's good. You see the I'm X there? It's not a good example. So put it in on each one here. Real quick. Go ahead. So to get to that folder, we just simply use this test, right, like that, see? Test/x. So we didn't put a protocol here. So when you don't use a protocol in the link, then the browser uses the same protocol that it used to retrieve the web page. In this case, it's going to use, this file protocol. And I think this will work. I can use the file protocol here, and that'll work. And it did not work. And I'll explain why in a second. I never did that before. And this is called see, when you start with the protocol and then slash, that's an absolute address. That's an absolute resource identifier. But this is a relative address. It says, where you are now, just put in a request for test/xhtml. Watch this. There it is. So the browser gives you the absolute address, or the URL, the Uniform Resource Locator. Now I'm going to copy that, okay? And now we don't have, this is called a relative address. And I can paste in the absolute address, which includes this protocol name here. This file, that means it's telling the browser you've got to retrieve from the file system. So you got protocol, these URLs have the following syntax. They have protocol name like HTTP or HTTPS or FTP or email, or there's a whole bunch of them. Or it's FILE for retrieving things from the local file system. And then it's got a colon, and then it's got a slash and a slash. See, it's the same with the university website. HTTP is the protocol name, colon, slash and a slash, and then the host name, or the domain name rather, the domain name. The domain name, and then a slash, and then the resource path. path to the resource. Yeah.
Is there any way to hide that type of information? Because I feel like if I wanted to do something malicious, I could use that to map out the directories of your server.
Yeah, well, the browser's not going to let you do it. That's when you try to do stuff like, I want to see, you know, I know in my desktop, well, if I loaded it from the file system, that's one thing. You know, if you retrieve this document through a web server, well, I'll show you here. Let's do this. That's a good question. Let's run the web server. And now we're going to get this index.html file. We're going to retrieve it through the web server. http://index.html. Oh, it has to be localhost, right? You got to have a host name there. Localhost. Port 9999. See that the university is using the default port of port 80 for unencrypted HTTP. So you don't have to show the :80, but it'll work. See, this thing here, this library website here, it's the protocol is http:// like that. See that? Then you got the host name like that. And it gets me right there, right? Not secure. But that's I didn't have to give a port number. That's because they're listening to the default port number, port 80. So we could specify it, :80. See that? When you have the host name, :port name, or port number, which is the name. This will give me the same result, see? And if you go to csusb.edu, right? If we want to put the port number in there,
443?
you think that's going to work? No, because this is HTTPS, which is secure. So it's got to go through the secure port, which is 443. So if I try to retrieve that, oh, what the heck?
Should redirect you.
Your connection to this site is not secure. It should be 443. That's this. That's the default port for HTTPS. There it is, no problem. Okay, coming back, and I know we're going through this kind of a long thing here. This is the end. We'll just finish up with this. So, you see this, here we've got the local host. No, what the heck here? This is, there's the file. And this X, that links into the file system, right? Let's take a look at that. See the X. Where's the X? See, the X will link into the file system. Well, we retrieved the web page from a web server. Yeah, it's a localhost web server, so, you know, well, the browser might say, well, it's a localhost web server, so it shouldn't let a web page that you retrieve over the internet, right, sort of pull up an arbitrary, some file in your file system. So if I click on this link, I think it ought to be denied, right? I mean, I'm assuming that the browser's not going to process. I'm going to click on this link. I got this file now through the web server. It's not going to let me link into my file system, right? Let's see. Clicking it, nothing. All right, so we look at this, look, not allowed to load local resource. Got it? So that's your point. You made this, so I'm illustrating your point. So it was a good point. Thank you. So there it is. There's a bunch of stuff for you to chew on and think about and experiment on your own. And we'll just continue on. So lab after this, and that's it. We'll see you in 2 days anyway.